My fiancée doesn't want you there. It's her day, not yours. That's what my son told me, on the morning of his wedding. I was already in the parking lot of the venue I paid for, dressed in the suit his mother bought him when she was still alive. I'd spent $18,000 for that ceremony. And I wasn't allowed inside. He didn't even look me in the eye, just sent a message through her cousin. I stood behind a tree, watching guests walk in, all smiles. And in that moment, I realized, I didn't have a son anymore. You don't get to the end of something without remembering how it all started. I still remember the way his little fingers gripped my thumb the day we brought him home from the hospital. He was born with this soft patch of hair that stood up like a rooster tail. Marjorie used to say he looked like a dandelion. We named him Thomas after her grandfather, kind, honest, quiet man. I always hoped the name would stick to him like character does to a good coat. Marjorie passed when Thomas was only 9. Breast cancer. The kind that doesn't care how good of a mother or wife you are. She was gone within the year. I still don't know how I got through that time. Some days I only got up because I had to make his school lunch. I folded his clothes the way she did, not because I cared, but because it was the only thing that still felt like her. We got by. I worked long hours as a carpenter, contract jobs mostly. I built homes for people I'd never meet, while patching up my own heart one beam at a time. Our house was modest but warm. Every piece of furniture had a story. I built Thomas's first bed when he was 5, with his name carved into the headboard. He cried when we had to upgrade it for a bigger one. Said he didn't want to leave his magic bed. He was a gentle boy. Sensitive. He'd collect feathers on the way home from school and tape them into a notebook. He loved books. Oh, he could disappear into stories for hours. Sometimes I'd find him under a blanket with a flashlight, whispering out lines from whatever he was reading. The Hobbit, Where the Red Fern Grows, even old mythology books from the library's dusty shelf. And we were close. Not in a loud way. We weren't the type to hug every 5 minutes or say, "I love you," at the end of every call. But we knew. We were each other's world. I went to every parent-teacher meeting, every school play, even the ones where he was just a tree in the background. When he turned 16, I taught him how to drive in my old Ford pickup. We stalled 4 times on the first outing, and he almost cried out of frustration. I didn't yell. I just told him, "You're allowed to mess up. That's how you learn." He repeated that line back to me years later when I dropped a plate and blamed it on getting old. I thought, that's my boy. College was a big deal for both of us. Neither Marjorie nor I had made it past high school. Thomas got a partial scholarship for architecture. Said he wanted to design sustainable homes. I was proud. I sold my wedding ring and took on a second contract to help him with the rest. He didn't ask, I offered. That's what fathers do. We lay the bricks so our children can walk a little smoother. I still remember dropping him off at the dorm. He had this old flannel shirt on, one I'd worn when he was little. He took it from my closet without asking. I pretended to be annoyed, but my chest swelled up when I saw him wearing it. I gave him a handshake at first, but he pulled me in for a hug. "Thanks, Dad. For everything." He didn't know how much those words meant. The first year, he called often. Told me about his classes, his professors, how hard calculus was. He even came home on breaks, sat at the kitchen table doing homework while I cooked his favorite, grilled cheese with tomato soup. We'd talk about books, life, dreams. I felt like I was getting to know him all over again, as a man this time. He met her in his second year. Jasmine. He said she was intense but brilliant. She was a business major, sharp as a tack, came from a well-off family. I was happy for him. He deserved love, deserved joy. I met her once during Thanksgiving. Polite, but distant. Called me Mr. Walker even after I told her to call me James. I tried not to judge. Everyone's different. And Thomas looked happy, nervous, maybe, but happy. He asked me once, "Dad, do you ever feel out of place around people who've always had money?" I told him, "Son, you can be rich in the bank and poor in the soul. Just don't forget where you come from." He smiled, but something flickered behind his eyes. I didn't press it. When he graduated, I was the loudest one clapping. He looked so proud in that cap and gown. I took him out for dinner, steakhouse, nothing fancy but nice enough. That night, he said, "I'm thinking of proposing to Jasmine." I raised my glass and said, "Then let's build another chapter." He grinned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Looking back, I don't think I lost him all at once. It was more like a slow fade, the way fog creeps in without you noticing until you can't see the road. One missed call became 3. 1 month without a visit turned into half a year. And then, I was just a line item on a budget. "Dad can cover this part." But back then, I didn't see it. Or maybe I refused to. All I knew was, I had raised a boy with my bare hands. I had put every bit of myself into him. And I believed, truly believed, that one day, he would do the same for someone else. I just never thought I'd be the one he'd forget. The first sign was in how he spoke. Not the words themselves, but the pauses. The way he used to talk with an easy rhythm, like we had all the time in the world. After he started dating Jasmine, his voice changed. Quick. Precise. Like he was being measured for how long he lingered on the phone with me. At first, I chalked it up to stress. College was winding down, job interviews were beginning, and he was serious about Jasmine. Serious in the way that makes a man start counting dollars and planning timelines. I understood. Life has a way of turning up the volume. But it wasn't just the phone calls. It was the visits. They got shorter. Less frequent. And when they did happen, he didn't stay overnight. Said Jasmine had early meetings, or they had to drive back for her dog. She never came inside. Sometimes she stayed in the car while Thomas walked in, awkward and distracted, like someone watching the clock at a funeral. One evening, he sat at the kitchen table, barely touching the meal I made. I asked if everything was all right, and he looked up like he'd forgotten where he was. Yeah, just a lot on my mind." "Something you want to talk about?" He shook his head. "Nah, just budgets and stuff. Jasmine's folks think we should look into condos instead of renting." I nodded. "Sounds smart. But don't forget what matters most. It's not about square footage, it's about who stands with you when things get tight." He nodded back, but his eyes had drifted toward the window. That night, I saw him step outside to take a call. I followed behind quietly, more out of habit than suspicion. I stopped just short of the porch light and heard Jasmine's voice through his speakerphone. "He still lives like it's the 80s. That house smells like wood and soup." Thomas chuckled. "He built that house. It's all he's known. Well, we're not living in it. I'm not raising kids in a place with creaky floors and no dishwasher." I stood there in the dark, holding my breath. Thomas said, he wouldn't want to live with us anyway. And she replied, "Let's just make sure he can't." I stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding like it hadn't in years. I didn't sleep that night. From then on, the world tilted a little differently. He started texting instead of calling. I'd send him photos of small projects, birdhouses I built, the shed I finally painted. No reply. Or if he did, it was a thumbs up. Just a floating icon in place of a conversation. Then came the subtle things. He once referred to me as James in front of her family at a dinner I wasn't invited to but heard about through a mutual friend. Said it sounded more professional. Like I was someone he needed to manage instead of a father. At Christmas, I mailed them a check. A modest gift, just enough to help with the wedding planning. He thanked me via email. Not even a call. No mention of coming home for the holidays. The last time he visited, he brought Jasmine. It was early spring. I had pruned the rose bushes out front and even dusted off the porch swing she used to scoff at. I thought maybe this time would be different. It wasn't. She walked through the house like a real estate agent inspecting a teardown. Ran her finger along the mantel and frowned. Whispered something to Thomas when she thought I wasn't looking. He laughed nervously. We sat down for lunch, and I offered to carve the roast chicken I'd prepared. Jasmine pushed her plate away. We're actually doing plant-based now. Thomas didn't correct her, didn't say a word about the hours I'd spent preparing. Just said, "Sorry, Dad. We should have told you." I told them it was fine, but my hands trembled as I put the knife down. They left shortly after. No hug. No warmth. Just a wave from the front steps. As they drove off, I stood there watching my son fade into the distance, wondering when exactly I'd stopped being his home. Still, I told myself it was a phase. Maybe it was Jasmine's influence. Maybe he'd come back around. Kids lose their way sometimes. The world pulls at them, teaches them to measure success by the size of their paycheck or the square footage of their kitchen. But then the topic of the wedding came up. He called me one night, late, abrupt. "Hey, we're finalizing the budget. Jasmine's parents are covering the honeymoon. Can you help with the venue deposit?" "Of course," I said, maybe too quickly. "Just send me the details." And he did. I wired over the money within a day. $12,000 at first. Later, another $6,000 for catering. He never thanked me in person. I remember telling a friend from church about it, how proud I was to be helping my boy start his new life. "That's what fathers are for," I said. "We lift them up when they're building something." She smiled, but her eyes looked sad. I didn't understand then. The day the wedding invites went out, I checked the mailbox like a kid waiting for Christmas. Nothing. Not that day. Not the next. Not the one after that. 3 weeks later, I got a text, just keeping it small. "Hope you understand." No signature. No call. Just that. I read it over and over again, thinking I must have missed something. Maybe there was a separate card. Maybe it got lost in the mail. But it didn't. What got lost was us. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the truth finally broke through my denial. I had just come back from the post office, still half hoping maybe my invitation had been delayed, misrouted, or tucked into someone else's box by mistake. I'd even asked the clerk. She gave me a gentle smile and said, "Sometimes things just don't get sent, Mr. Walker." I tried to laugh. Maybe he forgot to put a stamp on it. She didn't answer. That night, I got a call from Howard Jenkins, an old friend of mine and deacon at the same church Thomas used to attend as a boy. "James," he said, cautious, "I just wanted to check if you're attending the rehearsal dinner this Friday. I ran into Jasmine's aunt. She mentioned you wouldn't be there." My mouth went dry. "I didn't know there was one," I said slowly. There was a pause on the line. "Oh. I see. I just assumed, given, well, everything." I thanked him and hung up before he could stumble through more pity. That's when it hit me. It wasn't just that I hadn't been invited. I was being erased. I called Thomas that evening. He answered after 4 rings. "Hey, Dad." His voice was flat. Polite. Like someone answering a customer complaint. "Thomas," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "Am I supposed to be at your wedding or not?" He sighed. A long, drawn-out exhale that let me know he'd been dreading the call. "Dad, look. Jasmine and I talked about it. Her family's hosting most of it, and the guest list got tight. You know how these things go. I felt my throat tighten. I paid for the venue, Thomas. I know, and we're grateful. But it's her day, and she wants it a certain way. It's not personal. Not personal? My voice cracked. You're having a wedding I paid for, in a suit your mother picked out before she died, and you didn't even give me a chair? He was silent for a moment. Then, this is why we didn't want to make it a thing. A thing? I repeated. Thomas, I am your father. I know. But you make things uncomfortable sometimes. Jasmine's family. I make things uncomfortable? I couldn't speak for a full 10 seconds. I thought if I did, I might say something that would tear us both apart. Finally, I managed, you're ashamed of me. He didn't deny it. I just think we've grown in different directions, he said. You're set in your ways. Jasmine and I have different values. No, I said quietly. You have no values. He hung up. That Saturday, I drove by the venue out of something I can't quite name. Not hope. Not protest. Maybe grief. It was a beautiful building, brick and wood, with tall arched windows and a garden that looked like it had been painted by someone's grandmother. I'd chosen it after hours of research, wanting something tasteful but not over the top. Something Marjorie would have liked. I stood across the street in my car for 20 minutes, watching staff hang ribbons and set up chairs. I spotted Jasmine's mother directing someone with a clipboard. Her father was sipping something from a wine glass, laughing like he owned the place. No one knew who I was. Just some old man parked in a sedan with chipped paint and a tired face. I started the engine and drove home. On Sunday, I went to church. Mrs. Kemp, who used to babysit Thomas, walked up after the sermon, beaming. I heard the big day's coming up. You must be so excited, James. I opened my mouth. Closed it. Smiled. She patted my hand and said, You must be so proud of your boy. I nodded, swallowing something bitter. That evening, I opened the cedar chest in my bedroom. Inside was Marjorie's wedding dress, wrapped in plastic and preserved for no one. Beneath it, our family photo albums, one for each year of Thomas's life. I flipped through them slowly. The first day of kindergarten. His first lost tooth. That Halloween he dressed as a pirate and insisted I carry a sword, too. Marjorie laughing with her eyes closed, always touching his shoulder when she smiled. And then the last photo of us as a family, Thomas in his cap and gown, Marjorie's picture pinned to his robe. I stared at it for a long time. The boy in that photo would never have done this. But the man he became had. And what cut deepest wasn't the exclusion, it was the silence. Not one member of our family had asked where I'd be. Not one cousin, not one uncle. Not even his childhood friend Martin, who I taught how to fish and let sleep on our couch when his parents were going through a divorce. They'd all received invitations. And they'd all said nothing. Silence is its own betrayal. It doesn't scream. It doesn't slap. It just stands there while the knife goes in. I didn't go to the rehearsal. I didn't try to call again. What more was there to say? I felt like a relic. Something old and noble, but no longer useful. I spent the night sitting on the porch, listening to the wind move through the trees Marjorie planted. I watched stars come out like old memories. And I waited for something in me to settle. It didn't. I don't know what made me open his old bedroom closet that morning. Maybe I was looking for something to remind me of the child he used to be. Maybe I just wanted to feel something other than hollow. It had been years since Thomas had stayed the night. The room was mostly empty, just the old desk, a few books, and a stack of flattened boxes. But in the back of the closet, tucked behind a broken lamp and an old duffel bag, I found a slim black folder. It was labeled Venue, Final Payments. I opened it slowly, hands trembling, heart racing with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Inside were itemized invoices. Catering. Photography. Flowers. Chairs. Tableware. Total, $18,480. My name was listed under Primary Payer. In handwriting I recognized his. There was a note at the bottom. Transfer to Jasmine's family name before final approval. Dad doesn't need to be listed. There it was. Confirmation. Not only had I been cut out of the event, I had been erased financially, too. They were taking credit for something I paid for. My gift to my son had been scrubbed clean of my name like I was a blemish. I sat on the edge of the bed, folder in my lap, staring at the wall for what must have been an hour. Then I picked up the phone and called the catering company. The woman on the line was cheerful. Walker wedding? Yes, everything's on track. Jasmine's mother confirmed final headcount. Jasmine's mother? I asked. The contract is under my name. She paused. Oh. That's not what we have in the system. The final payer listed is Mrs. Evelyn Cartwright. I hung up without another word. The next day, I called the venue. Same thing. The Cartwrights were being credited as the sponsors. As the hosts. As the family footing the bill. I wasn't just unwanted. I was being written out of the story altogether. I sat on the porch that night with a bottle of bourbon I hadn't touched since Marjorie passed. Just one glass. Just enough to steady my breath. I closed my eyes and remembered a moment from years ago. Thomas was 12. He had come home after a fight at school, face red, eyes swollen. They called me poor, he said, shoulders shaking. Said my clothes smell like sawdust. I knelt down and looked him in the eye. You tell them this, sawdust smells like work. Like someone built something. There's nothing shameful about that. He nodded, but didn't seem convinced. I held him that night until he fell asleep in my arms. And now here he was, grown and well-dressed, pretending he had no memory of the man who smelled like sawdust. Later that week, I went to the local grocery store, nothing fancy, just a small corner mart I'd gone to for years. As I waited in line, I overheard two women in the next aisle talking about that big wedding coming up. That Cartwright girl really hit the jackpot, one of them said. Whole thing's paid for. Her daddy's loaded. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just listened. Yeah, and I heard the groom's dad won't even be there. Something about bad blood. Shame, the other replied. Must be one of those deadbeat types. I left without buying anything. That night, I found myself standing in front of Marjorie's photo again. I'd done that a lot lately. She was in her favorite sweater, the one with the little acorns stitched around the collar. Her smile was tired but kind, always kind. I don't know what I did wrong, I whispered. I gave him everything we had. The next morning, I started digging. I went through emails, receipts, old texts. I compiled every payment I made, every wire transfer, every invoice. I printed them out and placed them in a folder, labeled clearly, Wedding Contributions, James Walker. I wasn't planning anything yet. I didn't even know what I would do with it. But I needed something tangible. Something real. Proof that I had been part of this, even if they wanted to pretend otherwise. The moment that truly broke me came 2 nights before the wedding. I received a voicemail, left accidentally, I assume. It was Jasmine's voice. Laughing. And he still thinks he's invited. Poor guy. He's just useful for money. Once this is done, we won't have to deal with his guilt trips anymore. Thomas replied, quiet but audible, just don't tell him we're moving to Seattle. Duh. He wouldn't last a day there anyway. Can you imagine him trying to talk to my coworkers? They both laughed. Then the message ended. I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. Something in me just shut down. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't distance. This was a plan. And I had been the last one to see it. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited until the morning before the wedding to call him again. I'd spent most of the night pacing, folder in hand, going over every receipt, every word in that voicemail, every memory I could still hold on to without it breaking me. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Maybe some part of me still thought he'd come to his senses. Maybe I just needed to hear him say it out loud. He answered on the second ring. Hello? Thomas. It's me. A pause. Yeah. What's going on? I have a question for you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. And I want you to answer me honestly. Okay. Did you and Jasmine ever plan on inviting me? Another silence. This one longer. Then, Dad, we talked about this. It's complicated. It's not complicated, I said, sharper than I intended. You either wanted me there or you didn't. So which is it? He exhaled through his nose. I could almost see him rubbing his temple the way he used to when he was caught lying as a teenager. She didn't feel comfortable with it, he said finally. She thinks you'd make people uncomfortable. You'd probably talk too much or bring up Mom, and she didn't want that kind of energy. And you agreed with that? I asked. I didn't want to fight about it. So you chose her over me. I chose peace, he said. You don't understand what it's like trying to manage two very different worlds. I didn't want you to feel out of place. I paid for the venue, Thomas, I reminded him. I paid for every plate of food your guests are going to eat. You didn't think that earned me a seat? He was quiet again. You're trying to guilt-trip me, he said finally. This is exactly what Jasmine was worried about. I almost laughed. No, son. This isn't guilt. This is reality. He didn't answer. You erased me, I said, softer now. You took my name off the contracts. You lied to the caterers. You laughed while your fiancé mocked me. I heard it all. The silence on his end turned to tension. You went through our stuff. You left it in your old room. I didn't break into anything. But I listened. For once, I listened to what you really think of me. Dad. No. You don't get to dad me right now. My voice cracked. I buried your mother with my own hands, Thomas. I raised you alone. I built the bed you slept in. I made your lunches every single day until you graduated. And now I'm just, what? An inconvenience? A liability? I didn't say that, he said quickly, defensive. You didn't have to. The line went dead for a moment, and I thought maybe he'd hung up. But then I heard his voice, small and uncertain. I just didn't think it mattered. And there it was. I nodded to myself, though he couldn't see me. That's the part that hurts the most. That you really believe that. He said nothing else. I hung up. The next day, my neighbor Claire came by with a tray of lemon bars. Sweet lady, widow, about 10 years older than me. She'd known Thomas since he was in diapers. She didn't ask why I looked like I hadn't slept. She just handed me the tray and said, "Whatever you're carrying, James, let some of it go. It's too heavy for one person." I didn't answer. Just nodded and took the lemon bars. Later that afternoon, I walked down to the VFW hall. My friend Al was there, playing dominoes with a few of the guys. He looked up, noticed the look on my face, and motioned me over. "Sit," he said simply. I did. They didn't ask questions. Didn't need to. After a few rounds of small talk and slow games, Al leaned in and said, "You still thinking about showing up tomorrow?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to burn the whole place down, figuratively speaking, of course." He chuckled. "And the other part?" "The other part wants to disappear. Let them have their day. Let them pretend I never existed." Al stared at the game board, then said, "Or you could do the one thing they're not expecting." "What's that?" "Show up with your head high. Let them feel what it's like to face a man who gave everything and asks for nothing but decency." I didn't answer. But the idea sat in my chest like a warm coal. That night, I opened the folder one last time. I reviewed the documents. Then I added one more, a copy of my revised will. The one that removed Thomas entirely. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. I had offered everything I had, and he had shown me exactly what it was worth to him. Tomorrow, he'd have his wedding. And I would have my truth. The law office was quiet. Too quiet. That kind of silence that hums in your ears after bad news or before you do something that can't be undone. I sat in the same chair I'd sat in 23 years earlier when Marjorie and I first drafted our will. Back then, it was all so simple: leave everything to Thomas. Our home, our savings, her mother's jewelry, even the plot of land we'd bought near the lake in hopes of building a small cabin someday. We were building a life. One built on trust, love, and the idea that the boy we raised would carry it forward. But that boy didn't exist anymore. Now, across the desk from me sat Harold Wynne, my lawyer and longtime friend. His beard had grayed since I'd last seen him, and his glasses rested lower on his nose. "You sure about this, James?" he asked, scanning the folder of documents I'd brought. "This isn't just a change of beneficiaries. This is a full removal." "I'm sure," I said quietly. He nodded, not pressing me. "Any particular way you'd like to distribute it?" "Yes," I replied. "Split the house sale proceeds 3 ways: local veterans shelter, the Children's Literacy Fund, and the hospice center where Marjorie spent her last days." "And the rest?" "The car, the land, the accounts, same distribution. I've listed everything out. You'll find notes and contact information." He glanced through the pages. Very thorough. I had time. He leaned back, watching me. "You know he might contest this." "I thought of that," I said. "That's why I want a no-contest clause. If he challenges anything, everything goes to the VA hospital. Every cent." Harold gave a low whistle. "That'll hold up. Most folks don't think to include that." "I've been thinking a lot, Harold," I said, my voice steady. "Thinking about what legacy really means. It's not money. It's not a name on a deed. It's who you stand with when there's nothing left to gain." He folded his hands together. "James, I've known you a long time. This must have hurt." "It still does," I admitted. "But I've come to terms with the idea that blood doesn't always mean family. And silence can be its own form of cruelty." He nodded slowly and began drafting the changes. As I watched him work, I thought of Marjorie. How she used to tuck Thomas into bed and whisper, "You are my favorite story." I used to believe she was just being sweet. But now, I think she meant it literally. He was her legacy. Her proof that love can live on. And now, he was a stranger. But strangers don't get the homes they didn't help build. When Harold finished, he handed me a pen. "Sign here." I did. My hand didn't shake. He slid the paper into a folder and sealed it. "It's done." I stood, adjusted my coat, and turned to leave. "James?" "Yeah?" Harold looked at me for a long time. "I hope he regrets it someday. For his sake." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Back home, the house felt different. Not heavier, lighter, maybe. Like I'd finally stopped holding my breath. I walked through each room, touching the walls, the pictures, the furniture. These things used to feel like promises. Now they felt like memories, good and painful all at once. I sat in Marjorie's old rocking chair and looked out the window. The trees were starting to bloom again. Funny, how life insists on continuing, even when yours feels stuck. I pulled out an envelope and began writing a letter, one I didn't know if I'd ever send. Thomas. There's a kind of pain that words can't reach. You gave that to me. Not by forgetting me, but by pretending I never mattered. I used to think being a good father meant giving everything. Now I know it also means knowing when to stop. This house was built with my hands and your mother's hope. It will not go to someone who treated it like a burden. I hope your wedding is beautiful. I hope your life is, too. But I won't be a ghost haunting it, pretending this didn't happen. Goodbye, Dad. I sealed the letter and tucked it into the folder with the revised will. Then I walked out back, past the garden Marjorie loved, and sat on the swing Thomas once built for a school project. The rope creaked a little, but it held. I closed my eyes and rocked gently, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace. Not yet. But resolve. The final straw didn't come with a bang. It came with a thank you card. A printed, pastel-colored thank you card that showed up in my mailbox the morning of the wedding. The return address wasn't Thomas's. It was Jasmine's parents'. A floral monogram on the envelope. Inside, in looping cursive, it read: "Thank you for your generous contribution to the Cartwright-Weller wedding. Your support helped create a truly unforgettable celebration for our family and friends. With gratitude, Evelyn and Peter Cartwright." No mention of my name. Not one word about fatherhood, sacrifice, or love. Just a quiet erasure beneath soft pink lettering and embossed edges. It was addressed to our anonymous sponsor. I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked at the stack of documents on my desk, proof of every payment, every signed receipt, every cent that had gone into making today possible. Jasmine's parents might have had the last name on the invitation, but I had the invoices. And suddenly, I knew what I had to do. I didn't rush. I wasn't angry. I didn't pace or shout or punch a wall like some caricature of a bitter old man. No, I moved like someone preparing for a funeral, slow, solemn, with a strange kind of reverence. I laid out my best clothes, black slacks, a crisp shirt, and the navy blue blazer Marjorie once bought me for a job interview I never got. I polished my shoes until the leather caught the light just right. I printed an extra copy of the wedding invoice, annotated with red pen. I tucked the letter I wrote into the folder, sealed it with a clip, and slid it into a plain brown envelope. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I opened the wooden box at the back of my closet and pulled out my wife's locket. It still held a photo of Thomas, age 6, holding a fishing pole and grinning with no front teeth. I slipped it into my coat pocket, close to my chest. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I drove to the venue quietly, windows down, letting the morning air fill the cabin of my old sedan. It was the kind of warm, early summer day that begged to be joyful. The kind that made you feel like life was still out there, waiting, if only you had the courage to reach for it. Guests were already arriving when I pulled up. Expensive cars, laughter, women in bright dresses balancing gifts and clutches. I parked across the lot, under the shade of a tree, and watched them filter into the building I paid for. No one noticed me. Just another old man in a worn-out car. But inside, my name was everywhere, they just didn't know it. The venue's main entrance was buzzing with planners and photographers. I waited until they were distracted, then walked through the side entrance near the catering tent. The staff recognized me. One of the servers, a young woman named Lexi, smiled. Mr. Walker. Didn't know you'd be here today. I just nodded. Just for a few minutes. I've got something to drop off. She didn't ask questions. Just held the door open. Inside, the reception hall glowed with golden lights and sheer drapes. Long tables lined with name cards, wine glasses, and cutlery sat waiting like polished soldiers. The kind of elegance that photographs well. The kind of elegance people lie about affording. At the far end of the room, a small table was set up for the guest book and gifts. I walked to it slowly, taking in the room I'd made possible. And then I placed my envelope, clearly marked, to the groom, right in the center of the table. But I wasn't finished. I walked to the DJ booth, where a middle-aged man was setting up equipment. I handed him a second envelope, this one with a short, handwritten note, "Please play this message before the first dance. It will make sense." He opened it, scanned the contents, and looked up with raised eyebrows. "You serious?" "As a heart attack." He hesitated. "I don't want to get in trouble." I pulled out my wallet and handed him a $100 bill. "You won't. I paid for this place. Every inch. You're honoring a sponsor's request." He stared at the bill, then at me, and slowly nodded. "I'll time it just right." "Good man." I left the way I came, quietly, without fanfare. As I walked back to my car, I caught a glimpse of Thomas standing near the entrance, shaking hands, laughing. He looked good. Clean-cut. Confident. The kind of man most people would say had it all. He didn't see me. Or maybe he did and chose not to. I got in the car and closed the door gently. I didn't wait to see the fallout. I didn't need to. I'd said my piece, in paper, in presence, and in silence. And now, it was time to go home. I didn't see it unfold, but I heard about it less than an hour after it happened. The first call came from Claire, my neighbor. She was breathless with a mixture of shock and second-hand embarrassment. "James," she said, did you send something to the wedding?" I didn't answer right away. She continued, "Because if you did. Lord, they know. Everyone knows." I thanked her and hung up. The second call came from Al at the VFW. He didn't say much, just whistled low and said, "You dropped the hammer, didn't you?" And then came the third call, from someone I didn't expect. Martin. Thomas's childhood friend. The boy I taught to fish, who used to fall asleep on my living room floor watching old westerns with us. "Mr. Walker," he said, voice tight, "I just want to say I'm sorry. I didn't know they kept you out. If I had, I never would have stood up as a groomsman." "It's all right, son," I said quietly. "No, it's not." And everyone saw what happened. That was something. Here's what I pieced together from the stories. The ceremony had gone off without a hitch. Beautiful weather. Jasmine in a dress that sparkled under the sun. Thomas, standing tall, saying vows that sounded rehearsed. There were tears, smiles, applause. The guests were seated for dinner in the lavish hall, and everyone was sipping champagne by the time the DJ stood behind the mic. "Before we begin the first dance," he said, "we have a special message from someone who made today possible." The room fell quiet. The DJ read slowly, clearly, like a man who knew he was holding a live wire. "To the groom and guests, today's celebration was made possible not by the Cartwrights, but by one man, James Walker, father of the groom. Every dollar spent on this venue, the catering, and the decorations came from his pocket. He was not invited, not welcomed, and not even acknowledged. This event was built on his silence. Let it now be known." Then came the envelope I'd left at the table. Thomas had opened it earlier, probably thinking it was a wedding gift. Inside, he found copies of every invoice, every payment, and a short note in my handwriting. "Son, I gave you everything, my time, my labor, my love. I asked for one thing in return, a seat at your joy. Since I was denied that, I've chosen to take back something far greater, my legacy. Enjoy the day. It's the last gift you'll receive from me. I heard from more than a few people that the room went completely still. Some thought it was a prank. Others knew immediately it wasn't. Jasmine apparently stood up, furious, and stormed out. Thomas just sat there, pale as linen, holding the letter like it might catch fire. No one danced for a while. People whispered. Some left. Some stayed for the food but kept their heads down. A few approached Thomas, unsure what to say. But it didn't matter anymore. The truth had entered the room. And unlike me, it refused to be silent. I spent that evening in my backyard, watching the sun dip behind the trees, sipping a cup of coffee and listening to the cicadas hum their slow, ancient music. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel proud. But I felt seen. That night, I placed the empty envelope back in the cedar chest, right next to Marjorie's locket. Then I crossed his name out of the family Bible. It was the only time I cried that day. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The day after the wedding felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm. Nothing was broken exactly, but nothing felt right either. The air was heavy with a kind of stillness that clings to your skin. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't check my phone. Just moved from room to room in the house, unsure of what I was looking for. I ended up back on the porch, same spot I sat in the day before. The birds chirped like any other morning. The mail truck passed like it always did at 9:14 a.m. But inside me, there was nothing routine. Something had ended, and not just the wedding. It had been almost 24 hours, and I still hadn't heard from Thomas. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a half-hearted explanation or attempt to clean the mess up. I thought, for a moment, maybe he was too ashamed. Maybe he needed time. But as the hours crawled by and the sun moved from one side of the sky to the other, I stopped waiting. Some silences are temporary. Others are permanent. By evening, word had already made its way around town. This was a small community, and weddings, especially weddings with drama, spread fast. I went into town for a few groceries and felt the weight of it immediately. Some people avoided eye contact altogether. Others gave me those polite, pitying smiles. A few asked cautiously, heard there was some confusion at the wedding? Confusion. That's what they called it. Like a misplaced table setting. But not everyone was afraid to speak plainly. I heard what you did, said Mr. Lin, the owner of the hardware store. Took guts. I nodded. Claire stopped me outside the post office. You know, she said, I think your Marjorie would have been proud. That one caught me in the chest. I nodded again, but I couldn't speak. The truth was, I didn't know what Marjorie would have thought. She always believed in second chances. She would have wanted me to keep the door open, to be patient, to forgive. But she also would have hated what Thomas had become. She used to say, love doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you. It means telling them when they're lost, even if they hate you for it. Maybe I'd finally done that. Back at home, I tried to busy myself. Cleaned the gutters. Oiled the hinges. Reorganized the toolbox. But everything felt like stalling. Like I was just passing time until something happened. But nothing did. That night, I took a walk down by the lake, Marjorie's favorite spot. The wind rustled the reeds. A few ducks floated past like they owned the place. I sat on the bench we used to share and closed my eyes. I did what I could, I said softly, to no one. Or maybe to her. I gave him everything. And when that wasn't enough, I gave him the truth. There was no reply. Just the wind and the sound of water lapping at the shore. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A knock at the door. I opened it to find Emily, my niece, Thomas's cousin, standing there with a nervous smile and a small paper bag in her hands. "Uncle James," she said, "I brought banana bread." "Come on in," I replied, a little stunned. We sat at the kitchen table. She poured 2 cups of tea like it was the most normal thing in the world. "I heard what happened," she said after a pause. "I'm sure everyone has." She looked down at her tea. "Thomas is telling people you ambushed the wedding. That you embarrassed the family." "Did I?" "No," she said firmly. "You told the truth. And it needed to be heard." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until she said it. "He's not himself anymore," she continued. "He's not the Thomas the First grew up with." "Maybe he is," I said, staring into my cup. "Maybe we just didn't want to see it." She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. "I'm sorry he treated you that way. But not all of us forget where we come from." For the first time in days, something inside me softened. After she left, I found myself lingering in the hallway, staring at the photos still hanging on the wall. Thomas at age 4, sitting on my shoulders. Thomas and Marjorie baking cookies, flour everywhere. Thomas at graduation, that proud smile stretched across his face. They were like postcards from a country I could never return to. But maybe, just maybe, I could build something new here. With the people who remembered, who cared, who showed up. That night, I began writing in a journal. Not about Thomas, but about the house, the town, the folks who'd supported me in quiet ways, Claire, Mr. Lynn, Emily, even the girl at the catering tent who called me Mr. Walker, with a smile. I didn't write to preserve the past. I wrote to make room for something else. Not forgiveness, not yet. But purpose. Purpose doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it walks through the front door in muddy sneakers and a canvas backpack. It was Emily again, 2 days after our kitchen talk, standing in my entryway with a nervous look and a spark in her eye. "I have someone I want you to meet," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Another banana bread ambassador?" She smiled. "Not quite." She stepped aside, and behind her stood a young woman, mid-20s, curly hair pulled into a frizzy bun, paint smudges on her sleeves, and a sketchpad tucked under one arm. "This is Raina," Emily said. "She's an art therapy student. She works with veterans and kids who've aged out of foster care." Raina stepped forward, extending her hand. "Mr. Walker, it's a pleasure." I shook it. Her grip was firm. "She told me about your workshop," Emily continued. "How you used to teach woodworking to local teens." "That was a long time ago," I replied. Raina smiled gently. "But your hands haven't forgotten." I chuckled. "You sound like my wife." They stayed for tea. Raina showed me a few sketches, plans for an art therapy retreat center she wanted to launch. The dream was big, but her budget wasn't. She talked fast, with passion and nerves, the way people do when they care too much and expect to be dismissed. But I didn't dismiss her. I listened. And when she said, "There aren't enough safe spaces for people who don't have family," I felt something shift in me. After they left, I stood in my old workshop for the first time in months. Dust had settled on everything, the lathe, the clamps, the wooden projects half finished and forgotten. I ran my fingers over the workbench. The wood still breathed beneath the grit. The tools waited like old friends, patient and quiet. That night, I opened the ledger Marjorie and I had kept since we first bought the house. Page after page of expenses, repairs, dreams, and sketches. There was one entry from 1993 that caught my eye. Future idea: turn the garage into a community space. Art? Books? Something good. I smiled. Her handwriting always curled at the ends like ivy. The next morning, I called Harold. "I want to adjust the will again," I said. "Already?" he asked. "Don't worry. Thomas is still out." "All right then. What's the change?" "I want to turn the house into a community center, Marjorie's house. A space for veterans, foster kids, young artists, anyone who's got nowhere else to go." He was quiet for a beat. Then, "You serious?" "Dead serious." He cleared his throat. "Well. That's something, James. That's something real good." We drafted the paperwork that same week. Raina came by with more sketches, this time for real. Floor plans, paint colors, shelving ideas. We talked about knocking down the back wall of the living room to open up the space. Turning Thomas's old bedroom into an art studio. The dining room into a shared workshop with tools, supplies, a lending library of sorts. "I can bring volunteers," she said. "Students, retired teachers, even a few therapists I know. All they need is space." "I've got plenty of that," I replied. Soon, word started spreading. Claire showed up with paint rollers and 2 cans of soft blue she had stored in her basement since 2011. Mr. Lin donated lumber and offered free delivery. Al from the VFW sent over 2 veterans who were handy with wiring. People came out of the woodwork, folks I hadn't seen in years. Not because I asked, but because they believed in something again. Maybe we all needed a project to heal. It wasn't easy work. My knees ached, my back protested every time I bent to lift a plank, and I hadn't held a paintbrush in over a decade. But each day, the house came back to life, piece by piece. We tore down the broken, we patched up the rotted, and we made space, real space, for something new. At night, I'd sit on the porch, watching the lights flicker through the windows, voices laughing in rooms that had sat quiet too long. It didn't feel like a house anymore. It felt like a beginning. And for the first time since the wedding, I didn't think of Thomas with anger. I thought of him with a kind of sorrow, sure, but also with distance. He was part of my past, but he no longer owned my story. This home would outlive the silence he gave me. It would become something better. Something that mattered. And if he ever returned, if he ever dared walk through that door again, I'd point to the wall where we were planning to hang a plaque. Marjorie's house. Built from love. Rebuilt from truth. For all who need a place to belong. They started calling it, the house with the open porch. It wasn't official, of course. The name we painted on the front sign read Marjorie's house, with hand-carved letters Emily etched herself. But to the neighbors, the kids, the volunteers, it was simply the place where no one was turned away. I never thought I'd hear laughter echo through these halls again. The kind of laughter that comes from shared meals, bad jokes, and people bumping into each other in the kitchen, arguing about the right way to make sweet tea. But there it was, every evening. Veterans came first, Al sent them, mostly. Men who had seen too much, lost too much, and never quite fit back into the world. They took to the workshop like bees to honey. One of them, Richard, built a birdhouse so intricate we hung it in the front yard like a trophy. "I haven't made something this nice since '86, he told me, eyes misting over. Then came the artists. Raina brought in 2 students who taught painting classes in the living room every Thursday night. We used old jam jars for brush water and scrap wood for palettes. The smell of turpentine and fresh bread somehow blended into something comforting. The biggest surprise was the kids. Emily helped connect with a group home nearby, and soon, the back porch was full of teenagers, some loud, some quiet, all a little wary at first. They watched me closely, like waiting to see if the old man would snap. But I didn't. Instead, I handed them tools. Wood. Nails. A place to shape something real. Whatever you build, I'd say, you take it with you. Or leave it here, and we'll put your name on it. Some stayed. Some didn't. But every one of them left a mark. Thomas's room became a studio. Jasmine's name never entered these walls again. We filled that space with easels, shelves, and dried flowers in old mason jars. Marjorie's Bible sat on the windowsill, pages worn soft with use. People started donating things, books, blankets, even a vintage record player that spun old jazz tunes on Sunday mornings. We had pancake breakfasts and storytelling nights. Claire brought her famous lemon bars. Mr. Lin ran a woodshop lesson every other week. And through it all, I felt something I hadn't in years. Alive. Not in the way youth makes you feel alive, all urgency and possibility. No, this was different. This was purpose stitched back together from the frayed edges of disappointment. The house became full, not just with people, but with meaning. No one asked about my past. No one needed to. They saw what I was doing now, and that was enough. But then one evening, just as the sun dipped low and the porch lights flickered on, a knock came at the side door. It was soft. Hesitant. I opened it and saw a familiar face, one I hadn't expected. It was Lily. Thomas's daughter. My granddaughter. She couldn't have been more than 9 the last time I saw her. Now she was 17, taller than her mother, with her father's eyes but none of his guardedness. "Hi," she said, voice trembling. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. Of course. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once carved Thomas's initials after he got his first A in math. "I found out about this place through a friend," she said. "I didn't know." "I mean, I thought you moved or something." "I didn't move," I said gently. "Just wasn't invited anymore." She looked down, ashamed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what really happened until recently. Dad never talks about it. But I found a folder in his closet. With receipts. Letters. Your name." My breath caught. I hadn't expected that. She looked up at me, eyes glistening. "He lied, didn't he?" I didn't answer directly. Just said, "Sometimes people lie because the truth costs too much." She nodded slowly. "I'm not here for him," she added. "I'm here for me. I want to help. I want to know this side of my family." I swallowed hard. "Do you like to build things?" She smiled faintly. "I'm better with words. Poetry, mostly." "Well," I said, standing slowly, "we've got a quiet room upstairs. Used to be your grandma's sewing space. No one's using it now. You could turn it into whatever you need." She followed me through the hallway like she was stepping into a memory she'd never been allowed to keep. And when I opened that door, and she saw the old floral wallpaper and the wide window that caught the morning light, she whispered, "It's perfect." I left her there. That night, she read a poem during storytelling hour. A short piece about losing things you never got the chance to hold. No one asked who it was about. They just clapped. And in that moment, I realized something that made my chest ache in a new way. Real family isn't always the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up when you've been forgotten. It's the ones who knock on the side door, not because they have to, but because they still believe there's something worth finding. It had been 4 months since the wedding. 4 months since I stood quietly in the back of the venue I paid for, watching strangers toast a celebration I wasn't welcome at. Since I left behind a folder that spoke louder than I ever could. In those 4 months, my life had changed in ways I never expected. Marjorie's house was more than just a project, it had become a sanctuary. A soft place to land for people who didn't know they needed one. And for the first time in years, my home felt alive again. Then, one Tuesday afternoon in late fall, the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, organizing the canned goods we'd collected for the Veterans Food Drive. The knock came again, gentle, unsure. When I opened the door, there he was. Thomas. He looked older than I remembered. More tired. His eyes had bags under them, and his once pristine hair was slightly disheveled. He wasn't wearing one of his usual pressed blazers, just a faded sweatshirt and jeans. No ring on his finger. "Hi," he said quietly. For a moment, I didn't move. Just looked at him. He cleared his throat. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He didn't comment on the house. Didn't ask about the art supplies in the hallway, or the faint laughter coming from the living room where a few kids were playing a board game. He just stood in the kitchen, hands in his pockets, looking down at his shoes. "I won't stay long," he said. "I just needed to see you." I nodded slowly. "All right." He looked up at me then, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something real in his eyes. Not the carefully curated politeness, not the defensive coldness. Just a kind of weariness that came from having nowhere else to go. "I read the letter," he said. "The one you left with the receipts." I said nothing. He continued, "It was hard to read. Not because of the words. But because I knew every single one of them was true." Still, I said nothing. He shifted. "Jasmine and I were separating. It's not just about what happened with you. There's a lot. But that day, it changed things. For both of us." I let the silence hang for a while before speaking. "Why are you here, Thomas?" He looked away, jaw clenched. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you said in that letter. About legacy. About silence. About what I made you feel." His voice caught for a moment. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to deal with the parts of you that reminded me of everything I didn't want to become." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean poor?" "No," he said quickly. "I mean honest. Grounded. Uncompromising. You scared me because you never pretended to be something you weren't." I studied him carefully. "And now?" "Now I'm just tired of pretending." We stood in that silence, the kind that only exists between people who've shared both laughter and betrayal. "I saw Lily," he said suddenly. "She's been coming here." "She has," I said. "She's good with words. Must have gotten that from your mother." He nodded. "She told me about the poetry room. She made it her own." Another pause. "She said this place feels more like home than anywhere she's ever been." I didn't respond. "I know I don't deserve anything," he said, voice quiet. "Not forgiveness. Not even this visit. But I wanted you to know I regret it. All of it." I watched him closely. And for the first time, I didn't see the boy I raised, or the man who cut me out, I saw both. All tangled together. Fragile. Human. I took a slow breath. "I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen," I said. "You erased me. You let people believe I was nothing." "I know," he whispered. "And I've rebuilt something here, not just a house. A life. A new kind of family. I see that." I gestured toward the door. "They're in there right now. Kids who never got tucked in. Veterans who were forgotten by the country they served. They sit at this table. They laugh in these halls. They belong here." He nodded. "And I didn't let you belong." "No," I said. "You didn't." His eyes brimmed. "I'm sorry, Dad. I really am." I looked at him for a long time. "I believe you're sorry," I said. "But that doesn't mean we go back." He didn't flinch. I continued, "Forgiveness isn't something you're owed. It's something earned. Through presence. Through effort. Through time." He nodded. I'd like to help. If that's allowed. I studied him. There's always dishes to wash. Leaves to rake. Paint to scrape. He offered a small, tired smile. I can do that. I didn't smile back. But I gestured toward the mudroom. There's gloves in that bin. If you're serious. He nodded, walked over, and picked out a pair. And just like that, my son took his first honest step through a door he once slammed shut. Would you have forgiven him? Share your thoughts and subscribe for more emotional stories. It was a Saturday in late spring when we finally hung the plaque. The sun was warm, the breeze soft with the smell of new blossoms, and the front yard of Marjorie's house was buzzing with voices. People milled about with paper cups of lemonade, wiping sweat from their brows, carrying folding chairs, laughing over shared stories. Some of them were veterans who once wouldn't leave their rooms. Others were teenagers who used to walk with their shoulders hunched, expecting rejection. There were neighbors who had once only waved from across the street, now holding paintbrushes and casseroles. And then there was Lily, standing at the porch steps, holding a ribbon and a poem she'd written just for the occasion. The plaque was simple, carved into dark walnut and mounted beside the front door. Marjorie's house. Built by hands, held by heart. For those who have nowhere, and those who still believe in coming home. I read it silently while holding the locket in my pocket. Raina gave a short speech. She talked about community, about the power of showing up, about the miracle of what can grow when you choose to build instead of run. Her voice trembled at times, but she didn't break. When she was done, I stepped forward. I wasn't planning to speak, but the moment seemed to ask it of me. I looked out at the crowd. Familiar faces. New faces. Chosen family. My wife used to say this house was more than wood and walls, I began. She said it held stories. Good ones. Hard ones. And the ones still waiting to be written. I paused, letting the breeze carry the silence. I built this place with my hands. I filled it with love the best way I knew how. Then I lost some of that love. And I thought maybe that was the end. I looked over at Lily, who nodded slightly, her eyes already shining. But turns out, this house wasn't done. It just needed to become something bigger than one family. It needed to make room, for all of us. I stepped back, and Lily walked up the steps. She read her poem with a clear, steady voice. It was short, but I remember every word. You don't need blood to build a bond. You need light. You need chairs at the table for those still arriving. You need one open door. And someone who waits on the porch long enough to say, "Come in. You're not too late." When she finished, the ribbon was cut. Applause echoed across the yard. It was the kind that didn't feel like noise, it felt like recognition. A collective exhale. The rooms were open for tours afterward. People walked through the new studio with its shelves of art supplies and open windows. They peeked into the library nook with its old rocking chair, where a veteran named Mitch now read to a group of foster kids every Thursday evening. The dining room had been reconfigured into a community table, long, mismatched chairs gathered around a refurbished oak slab I'd pulled from the attic. And in the hallway, framed in brass, hung one black and white photo. Marjorie. In her garden gloves, smiling at the camera, hair pinned back in a way that made her look younger than I remembered. Underneath it, a simple quote in cursive. "There's always enough room for one more plate at the table." As the sun began to set and the guests trickled out, I found myself back on the porch. Thomas joined me there, not saying anything, just sitting in the same creaky swing I used to rock him in as a boy. We watched the last of the kids playing in the yard. Lily was helping them clean up their art supplies. "She's got your spirit," I said. "She's stronger than I ever was," he replied. A quiet passed between us. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. Just full. "You've done something good here," he said at last. I looked at the house. The windows glowed golden, and somewhere inside, someone was playing an old jazz record. It sounded like joy. "I didn't do it alone," I said. Thomas nodded. "Still. I'm glad you didn't wait for me." I turned to him. "I waited longer than I should have." "I know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. It was small, familiar. He handed it to me. I unwrapped it slowly. "Marjorie's wedding ring. I found it in the closet," he said. "I didn't know what to do with it back then. I think I do now." I held the ring in my palm, the gold still warm. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But something passed between us, a kind of understanding, a quiet truce. The porch lights flickered on, and Lily called from inside, "Dinner's ready." Thomas stood. "You coming?" I looked up at him. "Set me a plate." And for the first time in a long time, he smiled like he used to. Like my son. I stayed behind a moment longer, watching the lights dance on the lawn, listening to the voices echo inside. Then I rose from the swing and walked into the home Marjorie and I had built. The one we lost. The one we reclaimed. And as the door closed behind me, I felt it, deep in my bones. Marjorie's house was alive again. And this time, it would never be empty.